My name is Julie Kraft and I have bipolar 2 disorder.
I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn and I live with bipolar 2 disorder.
I was diagnosed 10 years ago at the age of 36.
I was told of my diagnosis and I remember being relieved but also terrified. I know the perceptions and the stigma that goes along with it. I started sharing my story about 4 or 5 years ago.
I decided to come forward and start sharing. It's led to me meeting the most amazing people walking the same path.
So we had talked about collaborating. My greatest hope is that others will hear our stories and feel less alone.
We can offer insight and give the world a real life living example of what bipolar disorder can look like.
This is bipolar.
This is bipolar.
Hi everyone, welcome back to This is Bipolar. As always, we're really excited to be together. I'm Shaley Hoogendoorn. I am a wife, I'm a mama, I'm an elementary school teacher, event planner, podcaster, and mental health advocate. So yes, I do all the things.
All the things.
Yes, and here is my co-host, Julie.
Yeah, my name is Julie Kraft. I am also a fiery, passionate mental health advocate. I'm also a wife, a mom of 3 girls, an author, enthusiast in life. And so, so excited to be here recording again. It's always a highlight.
Yeah, let's dive in. Today, we want to talk about triggers. And saying that, we do want to give a trigger warning because we still feel comfortable doing that. We will be talking about hard things as usual. Please, if anything does trigger you or cause you to have big feelings and it's too much, always take time for yourself, breathe. The amazing thing about video and podcasts is that you can walk away and come back. So the first thing that I thought I would do is just talk about and maybe even read the definition between triggers, okay, and triggers when it comes to psychology. So triggers are anything that can trigger like an emotion or a reaction. You know how sometimes when we smell something, it might remind us of other things. It can trigger positive and negative things. So, but when we're talking about a psychological trigger, a lot of times it's used when talking about PTSD, but we're using it more and more in the field of mental health because there are different types of trauma or wounding that people have. Before it was kind of just certain things and the big T trauma. And we're going to talk about some of that. But we also wanted to start with talking about some of the little everyday triggers and kind of for us living with bipolar 2, the difference between something that's like more serious of triggers for us than just causing a stress response, right? Because we know the difference between stress and an anxiety disorder is very different. So here we go. It says, triggers are anything that might cause a person to recall a traumatic experience. Okay, so it says, for example, here, graphic imagery and different things like, even smells or situations, or I know phrases can trigger me. And so it's more, it almost paralyzes you and does different things to your nervous system. That's kind of trigger. Otherwise, sometimes I notice that people talk about triggers, but really it just made them stressed out. It doesn't get to the point of overwhelm and paralysis. So I thought we would start off just naming that. And now we thought we would share with you some of our small everyday triggers. And so I would love to hear, Julie, what are the triggers that come to mind right now, or the things that cause you extra stress in your life?
Well, there are a lot of them, but I did make a list of them, and I have a few that top that list. So for me, I'm an introvert, and I definitely gather my strength and energy from my alone time. And so something that really, really is hard for me is if I have a jam-packed schedule, no downtime, and I just feel like I'm constantly go, 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 go. And so another thing I want to share is just how that manifests in my life. And so when I look at my calendar and I know that it is just, 6 days of nonstop people and commitments, I get angry, I get frustrated, I get sad. I mean, I get all the feelings. And so part of learning to manage my bipolar disorder is, being able to identify all my different triggers. And if I can, I eliminate some. And if I can't, then I do my best, to minimize them or figure out a way that I can manage them. So that's one of them. But getting more specific, driving has always been something that's been difficult. I've never believed that I've been a good driver, even though if you were to look up my driving record, it's fairly spot free. But so I have had some really scary experiences. I've been lost in a foreign country. And I actually drove around for about an hour with my navigation system in German. And I just ended up giving up. I was sobbing. I was in tears. I felt defeated. I went back home, and I was actually supposed to go to the airport to pick up my husband, who was coming in off of a very long international flight. And so on top of that, knowing that he was going to get off the flight and I wasn't going to be there, it just fed all of those lies and feelings, that I was a failure as a human being, a failure as an adult, a failure as a wife. And so at the beginning of my marriage, I had to do a lot of driving with my young daughter, and I would literally be shaking at the wheel and, catastrophizing, thinking that I was going to be in this terrible accident. And of course, none of those things have happened to date, but it has definitely been a process, and I have now learned a few things that help me. One of them is the more I drive, the more comfortable I get, and it always helps. I will actually sit and study a map for up to half an hour to just figure out where I'm going, how I'm going to get there, where I'm going to park, so I can eliminate as many unknowns as possible. And so it's getting better, but I definitely, my schedule now, my weekly schedule involves about 3 to 4 hours of commuting my daughter to school a day on multiple freeways. Wow. And it's a lot, but every morning I just get up, get centered, and I just figure, you know what? I can just stay in the far right lane. I can go slow. I won't let the car behind me pressure me. And, I love weekends when I don't have to do it, but so far it's going well. It's not easy, but I'm pushing through. And I'll just quickly mention maybe one other one. Okay, well, another two, really quick, change in plans. So if someone were to change plans on me at the last minute, that will throw me into a tailspin, and I will usually lash out, get so angry, and not want to go, not want to follow through, and be resentful the whole time I'm there. Because I think for people that don't have bipolar, or that don't understand how my bipolar brain works, I've already mentally prepared myself for wherever I'm going. If it's a cafe, I may have even looked up the menu, figured out what I'm going to order, figured out where I'm going to sit, where I'm going to park. So a last minute change for someone like me who is not spontaneous will just induce all the feelings, and now quickly, the one that really, I think if I were to look back and look at one that really affects not only me, but my family and those around me, is an unreturned message or text or an email. I think I have insecurities and, thoughts that aren't always rooted in truth. And so I will instantly default to the worst possible reason, that I've offended someone, that they don't like me, they never want to see me again in their life. And so sometimes within an hour or two, if I haven't heard back from someone, I will be spiraling in my thoughts, and that will come out in so many different ways, to the point where I've ruined days, sometimes weeks, obsessing about an unreturned message from someone, only to find out that they were away. They never got my message. They were busy. Their lives didn't revolve around getting back to me. So those are just a few of my smaller everyday triggers that it's a process. We still have our ups and downs with bipolar. So those are ones that I'm constantly having to keep in check and be aware of. But I'm so curious to hear some of your everyday smaller triggers.
Yeah, actually, I want to, because some of those are different for us, I wanted to explain how I react to some of those. So one of the ones that you said was the driving one. And I think that mine isn't so much driving anymore. Like in the beginning, because I moved from a small town in northern BC and I live in the lower mainland, like Vancouver. And I was scared to drive downtown. But for those of you that heard another episode, we won our wedding on all the prizes that went along with that. Like each table gave a prize. So this follow my tracking. I had to pick up all of the prizes, or like the dress was downtown that I got to help design, or picking up and meeting with the flower or the cake. It wasn't in my area, which I would have planned, right? So I had to learn, because their business hours were when my husband was at work. And so throwing me into that was a great motivation. So I know that some things that are hard for me, if I'm motivated, it's easier, right? Then like I have to. Then the anxiety comes up. And mine's more parking, because I cannot parallel park with someone watching, which basically means you can't parallel park, because there's always people around, right?
Always.
Yeah. And we have a decent, I used to have a van, now I have a decent sized SUV. So sometimes I'll park like so far away, and I just tell my friends, like, we might have to walk a couple blocks. So bring your umbrella, and parking garages freak me right out. And not funny story. We had our van for 9 days. It wasn't brand new. It was just new to us. And I was driving to the North Shore Anxiety Clinic, and for a family member. I obviously go to those kinds of things too, but I was so anxious because I couldn't. It's in this really popular place called the Key, and there's parking $5 jillion, and it's usually all underground. And I was so stressed out and circling, and I didn't want to be late because it's not cheap and all these things. So I actually was trying so hard not to hit other cars. I scraped my car on the big, what are those things, columns or whatever, cement columns. And we only had it for a few days. And so it triggered a few things. It triggered like the parking. And then also it triggered, one of my triggers is wrecking stuff, especially new stuff. I want it to be perfect at first. Like if things get nicked or dinged, or, if I stain something right away, and if I'm honest, not always right away. And if someone else does it, and I really struggled when the kids were little, like we joked around that I should have had stocks in baby OxyClean, right? Because it would just, and I think undoing a lot of that trigger is a lot to do with my childhood and not having a lot. So you took care of your things because there wasn't money to get another one, right?
Yeah.
Which leads into another big one for me, and it's losing things. And with my bipolar brain, it's really easy to lose things because I'm thinking so fast and so much that I'm not thinking, this is where you're putting your keys. And I know everybody tell me you have your one spot. I have a spot. In fact, I have 3 spots. But when you're carrying all the grocery bags, or you're wondering what's next, or you've thought 10 steps ahead, it doesn't end up in the spot. And the way I react to that is like a bodily reaction of like shame and guilt, and just like it's bigger than just like embarrassment. It's just like, what isn't, I get to the point where I'm like, you don't even have your life together. Like, you're a hot mess of an adult. Like, adults can find their stuff, right? And
Not this adult.
yeah, you're with me. And
I
then,
am so with you on everything you've said. I love it.
yeah, do you misplace things?
Oh, I mean, even I must say, and I know we've said this before too, we get just as much out of these episodes, not only from our community, but from each other. And just a super offshoot tangent. Back to the parallel parking. I put up a post on my Instagram years ago about having difficulty with that. And I had so many responses from people who have bipolar, but also have trouble with very specifically parallel parking. So if anyone out there is listening, know you're not alone. There's so much comfort to hear that parkades, or if you're in the UK, they call them car parks, stress you out as well. And I think, well, for me, it's all the unknown. Once I've done something once, I'm fine. But just to know I'm not the only driver out there panicking at those moments. And then as far as your keys and stuff, I'm the same. And it's not that I'm intentionally trying to be messy or a human tornado. I mean, my husband walked into our bathroom and he looked at the counter and he said, come here, like, what, can you just even try to explain what is going on here? And I'm like, honey, I don't do it intentionally. My brain is like eight days ahead. I'm already moving on. So it's
who has time to put it back in the right spot when I have a great idea for 2 weeks from now?
Exactly. So I just wanted to say, I'm sitting here going, phew, and I'm not the only one. So continue on.
Yeah, no, I think my reaction, and I think you brought up a good point, that a lot of the stuff, and we say this again and again and again, are stressful or do cause stress. And, what society is calling anxiety, not clinical anxiety, but, stress. And so their response would be like, okay, I have to look for it, get a little nervous or whatever. But I think what I try to make people understand, that it's heightened bazillion percent. Like, I am panicking as though I have a bear chasing me. Or I am panicking for something small, like it would be a huge life-changing thing. So my body goes straight to, and I might get this wrong, psychologist, but I call it my reptile brain because I explain it to children, but I think it's your limbic system. So you can't talk, like, it's very hard to talk yourself down or think logically, because your body's reacting and it's a good thing that our bodies are designed to do this when you are reacting to things that actually are going to harm you. Unfortunately, the way our brain chemistry is that little things can trigger that. And then on top of it, I get the shame about, and the anxiety about looking crazy. And making bigger deal than it is, right? So then I'm like snappy with my husband or, my kids or whatever, because I don't want them to think that I'm, reacting what I call crazy, probably not the best term, extreme. Let's use extreme, that I'm reacting extremely. I can't explain that I'm like hot, cold, sweating, thinking it literally is the end of the world if I don't find this. And I've already thought about, like, what if we never find our keys and I'll never drive my vehicle again? It isn't just like, oh, I might be a little bit late, right? Which I'm not downplaying that. That is stressful for a lot of people. But what we do here is try and explain the difference so that people understand this is real and it's an illness. And so give us grace, because it's that much harder. And I also, I don't know if I've told this story before, but losing stuff and wrecking stuff. So if I do it, I'm super angry, but I would rather wreck something than someone else. And I make these high standards about not doing things right, like hanging a picture straight or just painting a wall. And then messing up where the hole is, and it's like I've ruined everything, right? Or
Yep.
we just redid our 2 bathrooms, and just that there's a few things that already got messy or nicked, or I can see where there's a little mistakes on the ceiling.
Oh.
It makes me so anxious, and I'm like, in 3 weeks,
Yeah.
I might, but I probably won't notice that. But in the moment, like, the perfectionism takes over, and it makes me not a nice human. And then you pile on top of that, like, embarrassed and just this whole berating myself. And Julie and I have talked about this before. Let me know if you get this too, Julie, where the person in my head is nasty. Like, I would never hang out with, and I'm not meaning like I don't have delusions and that it's like a different voice. It's my own voice, but it's like me. No one would be friends with me. I would never. I try not to say those things to other people. A little bit comes out sometime, but there's also, like the, so I'm mad at myself, but I'm snapping and blaming my husband about the keys. And he doesn't use my keys. So how did he lose my keys? But I'm so mad at myself that I lash out. Do you relate?
Absolutely, I lash out. And I just want to jump back really quick, for all the giggling and joking about parking and all that, like Shaley said, in that moment, it is horrible. And the night I was lost trying to get to the airport, with every second of missing a street, the negative thinking about myself, and just, it was awful. It was awful to the point where when I got home, my daughters thought I had been in an accident. And then still to this day, I'm trying to be gentle with myself, but I think about that. That's another thing I do. I replay past mistakes. And to someone else, it may seem like the smallest, tiniest task in the world, easy to get over. But I think we feel deeply, and it's, if it affects us, if it hurts us, if it devastates us, that is enough to make it more than valid. So, for anyone out there that's experienced that, both Shaley and I, we are with you, and we're just sending out a big virtual hug, because it's so easy to go down that path of negative thinking and shame, just like you mentioned. And the lashing out, it always comes back to driving. But there was another incident where I was driving, we got lost, my husband was gently trying to direct us on an exit, and my daughter actually filmed it from the back seat.
What am I doing now?
You're gonna take the
driving
first
on
turn
the
on the
highway.
right.
Do I get over? No.
Yeah,
Oh my
get
gosh.
over.
Ah!
I'm not being rational. I'm shouting at my husband, telling him that it's his fault.
Now what?
You're merging onto this road.
No, I've never driven on this road.
Doesn't
How dare
matter.
you? Oh my gosh.
It's just fine.
Stop patronizing me.
I think I may have uttered a profanity or two, and I think that is how we react. And that's not a personal attack on our husbands or our kids or the people around us. That is just that instinct that, sometimes that's the only way we know how to react.
It's a triple whammy for us.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people, that will happen. They tell the story, they're over it, right? We have, one, the actual instance is like making our life hard. Two, we're having the physiological body terrifying reaction. And then three, we berate ourselves.
Yeah.
And like 3 months later, a year later, it comes up like, what an idiot, or what a failure, or ugh, that's so embarrassing. And then I know on top of that, sometimes you brought up the children thing. One of my, I don't know if it's a trigger or big anxious thought. No, I think it's a trigger. Is that I'm going to mess my kids up, right? One of the most freeing, but also terrifying thing I've heard is that your children or your people you live with or people around you can feed off your nervous system or tap into your nervous system, which is great when they're really stressed and it can help calm our kids by being calm. But my thought is, well, a lot of the time my nervous system isn't regulated, and because I have an illness, it doesn't come naturally to me. Am I messing up my kids?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's unfair to my husband, because we talk about reacting, and as loving as they are, it's not fair to them.
Yeah.
Yes, they give extra grace to us and whatever, but it's still like being in a relationship, I feel, I get stuck in that part is unfair. And I feel like I have to apologize a lot. And pre-medication and pre-diagnosis, I was pretty harsh and mean. And I'm very, we've worked through it, but it isn't over, I don't know if you've seen that video. Oh my gosh. If you don't, you have to find it somewhere online, but it's this guy, and he talks about if we did everything aggressively, right? So he's like doing regular things, like putting the garbage out, and he's like running and slam, even coming down the stairs. He's like, right? And he does everything. And you laugh because it's just ridiculous. But I also relate, because even when I don't have strong feelings about something, my voice and my body is just like, my opinions are so, do you know what I mean? Like I come off aggressive and not mean, just either sure of myself, confident, but also not considering other people's ideas, because I think I've thought it through, right? But it's a form of anxiety. Sometimes if I don't make quick decisions, I know that I'm going to spiral. So now I try to, my husband's like, can you even just pretend that you're considering my idea? Because sometimes I'll just be like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. Or that, no, this is what we need to do. Right. And that's disheartening for him. And I try not to do that with my children. So it's freeing to know. And especially, I don't know about you, but I'm much better because a lot of the physical symptoms are muted, not entirely gone, or I know how to deal with them. I feel like this is great that my kids can borrow from my nervous system, and it really does help me think about that. Whereas if I was by myself, I don't think I'd take the extra time to calm down. But it also, if I'm honest, it terrifies me, and I wish that I could tell you that I'm more gentle with myself, but I honestly, probably it's a thought. I fight the thought constantly that I'm going to mess up my children. They're going to be in therapy, which is a good thing. I want them to be in therapy, but not necessarily talking
because
about
of you.
me.
Right? I think it's so great that you've touched on our children or our husbands, or, if you don't have children, your significant other, and just the effects, just how it affects the people that live with us, the people that are around us. And I've had all those same thoughts and fears. I've done things and said things. I wanted to destroy that hidden video of me in the car because I just watched it and thought, oh my goodness, who is that monster in the front seat? But I think it was really good for me to sort of see it from a third person and actually hear it for what it was. And, I made a video, I included it in that. That wasn't my first choice, but I thought, no, I think it's good to put this out there just so that if there's anyone else out there that's had a not so great moment like that, they'll know they're not alone. But I think the most important thing too with our kids, and I've even worried about passing on my fears of driving to them, because they have witnessed me, white knuckled at the wheel. And so I think we just, need to give grace to ourselves, but also know that kids are, amazing, and they love us. We're the only parents they have. And, if we are honest with them and can just say, you know what, mommy had a hard time. This is something that's really hard for mom, but mom's working through it. And, thank you for just, loving me anyways. And I think the other thing too is to just, I love that quote. I think it's Maya Angelou. Sounds good. When you know better, you do better. And so I think as long as I'm constantly trying to be aware, trying to be a better mom, trying to do the best I can, some days I'm going to be better at it than others. But I think as long as I'm, trying my best, and my heart is in the right place. I mean, that is hopefully what those around us will see and hear in our not so great moments. They'll know
Yeah.
that, we're doing our best.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not easy, but
Yeah. And
definitely
I think
relate.
about, oh, sorry.
Nope, never. I'm done.
I think about our friends and our community and people that live with bipolar, and I think about hypomania, and I think about mania. And we do a post on Mondays called Manic Mondays, where I share and Julie has shared just what that's like, because that's probably the more misunderstood than the depression. And I've asked questions like, how would you describe it? Or, what's been the hardest thing? And the whole mania episodes are triggers, right? It's thing after thing after thing. And it triggered like sensory, from thinking to sensory, it's a whole package. And I've heard from a few people lately, just talking about these, life altering, really bad choices. And just, I don't experience full blown mania, but I've had some described to me, and I know my impulses, like to shop, to just thinking that this is the best thing, or not being able to not do the thing because it's almost physically painful. Like, you think if you don't do it, you literally feel like, I've convinced myself, like, if I don't do this next, like, I'm not going to be okay. As in, I might not survive, not just like, oh, this might be upsetting. And I know that that's something that people struggle with. And I know sometimes people are like, well, how can I give myself grace? Like, I've just ruined my marriage, or I've just, done this unforgivable thing. And I just want you to know that we see you. And we hear you, and we feel for you. And really, honestly, the only thing, with all the reading that I've done and just the healing work that I've done, is just, we can't change the past.
No.
Right? We can't change the past, and we need to make amends, of course. And we need, know better, do better, like you were just saying. But I think we have got to forgive ourselves somehow. And maybe not for the action, but give ourselves, some empathy, that on top of, just an average, what we call neurotypical, someone without a mental illness or disability person struggles with making bad choices. The impulsivity, and those aren't always you, and those huge mistakes don't define you as a person.
Amen.
Because they're out of character. We hear about things with, we don't talk about it a lot just because of our jobs and some of our boundaries. But I know I've heard a lot about, like, hypersexuality, or we've seen people that never, ever in a million years would cheat, and it happens, right? And I just hope that, I just think we need to be gentle with ourselves. And maybe it will take you a long time to forgive yourself, but know that, yes, it's you, but it's also not you.
Yeah.
And when I think like that, and I remind myself that it's an illness, it's not just like an everyday choice for us.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit. Like, what does it feel like to you, even though, a part of you might know it's the best choice, a part won't, but what does it feel like in your body or your mind when, either during or after you've done something? Do you feel a sense of urgency? I'd love to hear how that affects your life.
Well, I'm just going to, of course, do what I always do. I'm going to jump back a couple sentences, just what you were talking about, Grace. And I have to share my favorite quote of all time by Sherry St. Cloud. And it is, she could never go back and make some of the details pretty. She could only move forward and make the whole beautiful, which I just think is the most beautiful quote, because all of us, have details or moments or decisions that aren't the best. And like you said, they don't define us. They don't doom us. They don't set the course for the rest of our life. And so, that quote, I think, is just, Beautiful. And you know, some of our worst moments account for only minutes of
Yes.
47 years of my life. And so I think it's so easy to get stuck in those darker moments, but just remember the whole is beautiful. So, okay. So now that I've shared my favorite quote, what were you asking me? How I feel in those?
Yeah, like do
Say it
you feel
again.
a sense of urgency, or maybe tell me a story about impulsivity or how you feel, something to do around this impulsivity, because I think that when episodes are triggered, I really think that impulsivity is a big trigger for us, or a big reaction to a trigger.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like you, shopping has been something that I struggle with, and I'm creative and I love decorating and I love creating events. So it all kind of ties together. And so I will have to keep myself in check. And it's not that I'm, venturing out to spend insane amounts. I shouldn't use the word insane. Unbelievable amounts of money. I get caught up in wanting to create a beautiful experience. And then I'm a thrifter, I'm an upcycler. So before you know it, actually, honesty moment, where's my husband? We have a thrift store down here, and every Monday is 50% off. And so today's
Oh my
Tuesday,
goodness.
which means yesterday was Monday. And my cart just grew and grew. I had convinced myself I needed all of it. I'm going to spray paint most of it. And my daughter came around the corner and said, Mom, like what is going on? And I bought it all. And as I was checking out, I just had this, but it's all in the trunk of my car hiding. I trickle it in one piece at a time, but that's definitely something that I've had to really, check myself, no pun intended, at the checkout, and say, do I really need this? Do I need this right now? And sometimes in that moment, I'll have that little, I don't really need these 2 pillows to add to my 50,000. But a lot of times it will be something that's tied. And what's tricky is oftentimes it's tied to something beautiful, whether it's gift giving or decorating my home. And so that's what makes it really hard to put the brakes on for me. But I guess that would be one example of me having trouble with impulsivity.
I can tell you, I can relate completely. And one thing that helped me describe it to myself so I didn't berate myself, and also to my husband, is half the time it isn't like I want the stuff that calms me. It's that, and of course I want the stuff, but I was trying to explain, like, to me, when I buy something for my home, I'm not just thinking that this looks pretty. I'm imagining people coming into my home and how it's going to help make more of a comfortable, safe space. And of course, my ego, I want them to be like, your house is beautiful. But, let's be honest here. But same with when I buy clothing, I think of where, because I'm an extrovert, I think of where I could wear it. Or then I start, like, it calms me because I'm thinking of a brunch with my besties, or I'm thinking of a party, or do you know what I mean? I'm thinking about where I could wear it, less about like I have to have this. And also with our thinking ahead, and especially when I'm manic, I want the most beautiful world and a beautiful life and beautiful ideas, that I feel like these things are gonna make my life better, and extremely better. Because you just see so much beauty. And I recommend you go watch the episode of Modern Love with Anne Hathaway.
Okay, I thought you were going to say the Minimalist documentary. I said, no, more is more.
Yeah, and like you said, like that is I think it's a trigger, the sale. And like you, thrift shopping, I feel like it's okay because I got on sale. But if I'm buying something every third day that I got a deal for $14.99 or $20, figure out how much that is at the end of the month.
Yeah, well, we actually did do that once years ago. My husband, we were budgeting, and I was just buying a picture frame here and a pillow there, and we totaled up how much I had spent in a month, and I was mortified. So that sort of, corrected
I'm
me
having heart palpitations just
for a
thinking
little
about
bit, and I think too, I need to remind myself, if I'm having people over, if I'm trying to create an experience, 99% of it is just being with them and talking with them. I mean, if it's beautiful surroundings, even better, but sometimes, I get so caught up in the thing, or I'm lonely, or I'm sad, and oftentimes stuff fills the void temporarily. And so, that's definitely a part of it too.
I'll find myself driving to a store when I'm anxious, or when I'm not feeling well, because another thing, especially when my mind is full and like a tornado of things, I find I go to specific stores, not always thrift stores, but like a Home Sense or a Winners or a house store, or just because of the organization and the beauty there.
Ooh,
It can
interesting.
flip me out of my head to see like a beautiful display, or like if I go into like a jean store and they're all lined up, I can just be like, which
Interesting. I love that you shared that.
if I could use that and leave without something, it would be a great coping strategy, but I never leave without
Exactly.
I would love to just transition into talking about some of the things that work for us, which we've mentioned, but also we've, look at us being all fancy. We've read a couple articles about things and have learned a few things that, that help us. And I know one of the biggest ones for me is so simple. And I roll my eyes when people would say it, or therapists, because we think big. I always think there has to be big solutions to my problems.
Yeah.
And I used to think it has to take it entirely away. So if it doesn't take my anxiety entirely away, it doesn't take the trigger entirely away, why bother, right? Which doesn't help. And I found that speaking it aloud, or typing it, or telling someone else, just saying it, does it take it completely off my shoulders? No, but I feel a little bit lighter. And I am so grateful for our community when we ask questions and just write things out. Some people, I know there's some people that look forward to our Thankful Thursday post every week, where we do the 3 things, because I think I'm grateful, but do I take the time to like list them? There's power in that. There's power in your pen going to paper and putting it down. There's power in saying it aloud, right? Because we know shame loves darkness and secrecy, right? You put it out in the light and it's like, personal ways that I know you mentioned planning ahead is awesome for you, like looking at a menu or that kind of thing helps you. Is there any, before we talk about some that were in this awesome article?
Yeah, well, there's actually one in this list we were going to talk about that I can speak to with some examples. So one is, do not give in to avoidance. And I know our first gut reaction to is to avoid the thing that is causing us stress or anxiety. And so, driving is the perfect example. We moved downtown Vancouver a few years ago, and I knew I had 2 choices. I could either walk everywhere, which is a great option a lot of the time, but I knew I kind of needed to face my fear. And I really have found that as hard as it is on some days, to just do it, to just get behind the wheel, take a deep breath. And every time it gets a little bit easier. And you don't have to, jump 2 feet in. So maybe you walk some of the time, drive some of the time. And also some days are better than other days. Some days I've, gotten out of bed and thought, today is not a good day. And if we're going somewhere, I'll ask my husband, do you mind driving? And another really quick example, grocery shopping. I know I'm not the only one out there that can't stand it. Physically walking down the aisles, passing by people, has been really hard for me in the past. So in this case, and I always have to sort of check myself, am I completely avoiding it, or am I just identifying an area that I can make a little bit easier for me? And so while we were living in the city, I did do delivery. So I decided, if I can get my groceries delivered, if I can have one less thing weighing on my shoulders, then why not? And you know what? That just was a bit of a life changer.
Yeah,
And
can I jump
so,
in on what you were saying about
yeah,
that? Because I
jump
think you
in.
brought up two wildly important things. You
Yeah.
talked about fears and facing them and avoidance versus being aware of triggers and making things easier for yourself. And I learned this really cool thing. And
Share it.
so if you guys don't know, I am wild about and excited about and insert all the words about Glennon Doyle and her podcast We Can Do Hard Things, and also her books. I find them I just find them pretty much revolutionary for my thinking, and I feel like she sees into my soul, which is a beautiful thing. So she talks about that, about fear, and her family kind of makes up words, and which I love because I do too. And she has a term called skited.
Yes, you told
And
me about skited.
Yeah, scared and excited, but she explained it. So I've known the word for a while, but she explained it as, okay, so it's kind of in a both and situation. So she talked about how you're scared or anxious, then ask yourself, but did you want to still do it, or do you want to see the result? Okay, versus you're scared because this might bring you to a bad place, or this might completely, it has triggered episode, either depression or anxiety, or maybe if you have obsessive compulsive disorder, it triggers you to do a compulsion. The two differences, right? So
Yeah.
they use skited when it's something that they're scared of, but also excited, and they actually want to do, even though they or maybe talk about wanting to, no, I don't, I'm avoiding it or whatever. It gave them language so that she knew with her children or with her wife, or and we can do the same, is that when we say skited, it isn't the same as scared, terrified.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's this make my life hard, trigger, all those things. It's like, I actually want to do it, but I'm also scared. And I think that that's a beautiful form of language to be able to understand each other, because then, okay, then that signals to me, I'm going to encourage you to do it. Right. Whereas if you're just scared or whatever, then we really need to take a look at, if you're terrified, if this is actually adding to your life, or is this, and I love that you said that, because sometimes I get so frustrated with the whole, like, face your fears and, no fear and blah, 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 blah. A lot of that can trigger an bipolar episode that will last weeks or months. And it's something that could have been avoided. So I love that you made that distinction.
The times that I have pushed myself and done things that I didn't think I could, I cannot even describe the feeling of, I felt like I conquered the world. On the days that I did go to the grocery store and came home and the fridge was full, I just thought, amazing. And I just, it was great, because it taught me too that I can do it. And so, when I would get them delivered, I could say to myself, it's not that I can't do it. I have done it before. It's just, I'm choosing to do this. And the other quick example is my husband's staff Christmas parties.
Yes.
Not at the top of my list of things that would make me comfortable. And some years I didn't go, but I would wake up the next morning and not feel the best. And so one year was really tricky. I was on the fence. I had planned for it, had my outfit, wanted to bail, didn't want to go, but forced myself to go. And at the end of the night, I just felt like $1 million. And I knew that it meant a lot to him. And it was a great thing. But I also realized there are some years where, it just wasn't possible for me to get there. And it wasn't the end of the world. So that's my 2 cents. Now, are there any other coping strategies, because you do a lot of reading, that you would like to share?
And I probably won't get right, but I'll share what feels right to me that might not feel right to other people's. But one of the things, and you and I struggled talking about this, because this one says, learn your stress signature, or your or the things that trigger you. So, recognize, as soon as you recognize it, then you can start trying not to get to the fight, freeze or fawn episodes. And so just, I think that the way to do that, because it's so fast with bipolar and it doesn't always come on slowly, especially real panic attacks versus, anxiety attacks are kind of, they take longer to build up, whereas panic attacks are they're intense. You often need external help to get through them. I think that trying to recognize those, and a way to do that is to do body scans, right? Do body scans, try and see if there's a pattern of your nervous system getting dysregulated in certain instances. I do also want to say is that, that's told a lot to, neurotypical people and people that live with mental health disorders or other illnesses. And it isn't as simple as it sounds. So I find this really hard to put into place. So, because I know that there's way more triggers than just those. And, we might talk about some deeper ones.
I'm just going to jump in and ask, can you clarify a tiny bit more about body scan? Because
yes.
I don't read as much as you, and I'm thinking about the full body scan.
Yeah. So if I'm able to catch myself, I'll do, a body scan, because I'll just, it's easy to say I feel anxious, or I'll do a body scan and be like, ask myself, where am I feeling this the most in my body? And it's interesting because it seems like such an abstract question, and I'd like roll my eyes or be, not take the time to do it. But usually you can find the specific area, and sometimes then that brings you to your wound, right? And then you're able to be aware of the wound and maybe work on it, right? Like work on how you can try to move forward or try to reframe. So for example, sometimes I feel things in my throat, and that's a real indication to me about, about words and about how I feel silenced and not heard, right? Is this easy? No, this has taken me a lot. Like I've been doing this for years now. Or sometimes I feel it like my heart actually hurts. And I know that, is sadness. So I need to look at that and look and examine that sadness and figure it out. Or sometimes if you go through, like, I'll be like, okay, breathe here, breathe into it's kind of like a little bit yoga, like breathe into different spaces. So I'll breathe, like think about my breath moving down my body, and that really helps. But mostly body scan, like figure out where you're feeling it in your body and how you can calm that down. Like if it's in my hands, like if I feel like I'm moving or whatever, sometimes I do this. Because, podcasters, I'm rubbing my hands together, palms together vigorously. And because it causes some heat, and it also almost resets your nervous.
And I know you've talked too about actually going outside in bare feet, or I've even heard about ice.
Yes, tell us about that.
Well, I haven't heard a ton about it, but I have read it's actually, quite literally chilling out.
Those little things. And as much as I make fun of essential oils because so many people tell me it's going to heal me, your olfactory, whatever, you're sniffing.
Sounds good.
Let's do sniff. Sniffing is better. Yeah. But you're using your 5 senses in a different way than what you're feeling. So doing something different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you also touched a tiny bit on another coping mechanism, which I'll just really quickly talk about, and it's just correcting our thinking about the trauma or the wound. And so for me, I don't have a capital T trauma, but I do have, I talked about unreturned emails and automatically defaulting to people not liking me, people not accepting me, people being angry with me. And that's just not founded in reality or truth 99% of the time. And so it's not easy, and I really have to be aware and try to retrain, my thinking. And when I can't do it for myself, that's where I'll go to a trusted friend or you or my husband and say, I'm really having a hard time with this. Here's the situation. Am I approaching it, from the correct point of view, or am I overreacting? And, my husband will often say, go back to your last known interaction. Did you do anything, that would upset them? And, and he'll actually sometimes say that that's not rational, what you're thinking right now. And that really does help. So there's another really quick, pointer. It's just,
and he's your trusted person. Like, please.
And not everybody is a trusted person.
And you've asked him for that help, right? Please don't go around telling us we're irrational. That will not go well.
Yeah.
But he's
exactly. But oftentimes, I've bounced things off you in ways that I'm feeling. You've been very helpful to just say, yes, so we need each other. This is community and connection. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah. Even if no one ever listened to our podcast ever, this has been so healing for me just to be with you and talk to you.
Yeah.
I love what your husband's
Absolutely.
doing, because in books I've seen it and heard of it in therapy, is being a detective. And I love that, like looking for clues to see if this thought is rational or true. And sometimes, what we tell ourselves, it could be true, but the chances are not. So I think this kind of goes into this one. It's called labeling your emotions without judgment, right? So then say your husband, for example, tells you, that's not really an irrational thought. So to be able to label that, okay, it's not an irrational thought, and let it kind of float by and recognize it, but not judging it, because we talk about that added layer of judgment, right? So just being like, okay, that's not a rational thought. Everyone has, irrational thoughts also. It's very heightened because of my bipolar disorder, and be able to just be okay, instead of being like, I'm not rational. I'm not a rational person. I'm crazy. I don't belong, going down that hole. And I think that that's, one thing that and I'd love to end on here, is one of the things that I've learned, and it was from my wise friend Brenda, and it was my word of the year, is curious. And she asked me, like, get curious about your emotions, or get curious and ask questions about them instead of judging them, right? And so that looks like asking yourself, why do I think I feel that way? When have I felt like this in the past? Are there patterns, right? And just being curious about them, and come at life with curiosity. Like, for example, be like, oh, I wonder if my friend is really busy right now, or I wonder, I wonder about this, and being curious about things, then, immediately judging them, because it's so easy for our brains to go to negative, right? And my biggest thing is, someone said to me, I hope it, that sounds like you're a hard thing that might not go well, but, I hope that your day, or this hard conversation, I hope it surprises you with goodness. Or, or trying to think, like, one of my kids is going through some really hard social stuff, and just be like, she'll make up things that are the worst thing that she thinks that she's going to happen, usually being alone or not included or whatever. And I'm like, well, what if you made a new friend, or what if it wasn't that bad, or what if, like, just entertaining it. And it's not the same as saying good vibes only, think it's going to happen, manifest. It's not that. It's just combating the negative thought by also thinking about possibility of it not turning out to be the worst. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said. Here I go rambling again about just being curious. And I think if I were to leave any advice with any listeners, about the topic of triggers and helping to identify them, I think, I actually sat down at one point and tried to identify, be curious, and write down, all the things that were stressing me out. And then I went through that list. Some of them were even toxic people. That's probably another episode or 5.
Yes.
Whichever ones I could eliminate,
yes,
I did. And life is life. We have people in our lives that we can't
Yeah.
eliminate. We have certain responsibilities, duties that we can't eliminate, but we can usually do something to make them a little bit more manageable. And you know what? Call in help where you can. And the other thing that
Yes.
hasn't always been easy is sharing some of my hardest things with trusted friends and family. And people are amazing. I say it all the time, but they really are. And so I had a friend, I was meeting them, and she actually sent me an email with driving instructions, parking instructions, everything I needed to know. And so just to feel seen and heard by her in that area was amazing. So I always feel this way, that we could talk for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
And there's so many other aspects of triggers, you know, bigger life triggers. So I have a feeling we are definitely going to be doing another episode in the future
100%.
on triggers.
And I'm sure we'll be asking about questions to do with this on our social media, because we want to hear from you.
Yes.
So let's get curious about our triggers, and we hope this was helpful. This is Bipolar.